G'day Junior Techies, my name's Mr. P. I'm going to be taking you through the section where we deal with the respiratory system. This is the first theory video of a few, so please make sure that you get your hands on the rest of the videos and the worksheet as well as the theory booklet and answer memo, just to help you prepare in your studies for this section while preparing for your final exams. All right, so the first thing for us to do is look at the respiratory system, and sometimes it's required of us to draw a part of, or a large section of the respiratory system, or this is something that we're going to get as a question, and we need to be able to interpret what we're looking at as a diagram. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly have a look at the air passages when we look at the respiratory system. Okay, so if you have a look over here quickly, you'll see I've drawn the profile of the nose and the mouth. I'm just filling in with the sinuses. You'll see there the tongue. And there I draw the epiglottis, which separates or creates the divide between the esophagus and the trachea. We'll have the pharynx there. I've just colored in the passages that allow us to breathe in. So you see the first arrow is indicating the nasal passages, and the second the mouth. Okay, you'll see the nasal cavity over there, which is where we're going to find the sinuses. We have the nostril, we're going to have the mouth, and if we look over there, I've just shown you where the esophagus is. Now remember, we don't breathe into the esophagus, we breathe down through the trachea. The esophagus is part of our digestive system, so we're looking to identify the trachea, which is on this side over there, where I've just identified the larynx. The pharynx a little bit higher, and our larynx is where we're going to be finding our voice box. Okay. So that's an important one to be able to differentiate between, that the voice box is linked to the larynx and not the pharynx. Right, if we take a section very quickly of this area over here, which is going to be the back of the nasal cavity, and we have a look at the types of cells that line these nasal passages, we see that they are ciliated columnar epithelium, very unique type of epithelial cells. You'll see I start with a basement membrane over there, and you'll see the columnar cells there. Now, the columnar cells are sort of spread between goblet cells as well, each with a nucleus that I've drawn over here. There you can see I'm drawing the cilia, and I'm going to be labeling each one of these very quickly. So here we have the basement membrane. Here we're going to see the columnar cell, our cilia, and then there the goblet cell, which is responsible for the production of mucus. Now the mucus is a very, very important part of this system because it provides a mucus layer which actually traps dust particles as we are inhaling, and it prevents these particles from making their way all the way down into the lungs. Alright, so this is a very, very important part to remember. Part number 2 of the respiratory system, we're going to have a look quickly at the, I suppose, the channel through which the air moves as it fills the lungs. And what I'm drawing now is I'm drawing the cartilaginous rings of the lung so that you can see they branch off from the trachea into what I'm showing you there is the right lung, and we have the terminal ends of these little bronchioles being the alveoli. You'll see I've identified little cloud-like structures over there, and these are groups of alveoli, and the gas exchange of the respiratory system is going to happen at those terminal ends. All right, I'm going to have the complete lung on the left side, and the section lung or the sectioned lung on the right side over there. Okay, now the lungs are found within the thoracic cavity over there, and I've drawn the ribs, and on the inner side of the ribs I've got my internal intercostal muscles, and on the outside the external intercostal muscles over there. Let's quickly label a few of these structures. You'll see I've got the left lung at the bottom, the trachea, and then the larynx where I find the voice box. I've got my diaphragm at the bottom, which is dome shaped. It's a very, very important structure, this, when we look at the inhalation and exhalation process. So the breathing in and the breathing out process over there. A couple more labels over here for us. I've got my alveoli, as I mentioned before. Those are the terminal ends of the bronchioles, and the right and the left bronchus. These are the first branches of the trachea as the air moves into the right and the left lung. I've got a pleura, which is a membrane that surrounds the lung, and what this does is it keeps the surface moist, and it enables the lung to inflate and deflate without friction between the lung and the inner walls of the thoracic cavity. So that's also a very, very important structure when it comes to the lungs, is that pleural membrane surrounding the lungs. Okay, here I've identified structures A and B, and I made mention of them as I was drawing. You'll see that structure A, the external intercostal muscle, and they are responsible for the process in inhalation, and B, the internal intercostal muscle, when we have forced exhalation. Because remember, in the processes of inhalation and exhalation, and we're going to be looking at these in a bit more detail just now, these processes are very different from one another, because in inhalation we have an active process with active contraction of the external intercostal muscles, and then inhalation, sorry, that's inhalation, and with exhalation it's being a passive process. But if we are exercising, we're actually exhaling, and forcefully so, which means there is a contraction, but this is not of the external intercostal muscles, but of the internal intercostal muscles, to purposely reduce the volume of the thoracic cavity to force air out of that space. All right, if we look at ventilation, and I've made mention of it a little bit already, but let's have a look-see. If we're comparing breathing in and breathing out, inhalation and exhalation, we're going to see that the processes are slightly different from one another, but they involve similar structures. Okay, so when it comes to the inhalation, you'll see I'm drawing the ribs, and I've got both of the lungs. You'll see that the diaphragm that I have shown over there is flat, and the two arrows that you've just seen me draw over there is how the rib cage is pulled up and open by the contraction of the external intercostal muscles. The arrows from the diaphragm down is as the diaphragm contracts, it's pulled flat, and both of these contractions, the external intercostal muscles as well as the contraction of the diaphragm, both create the environment of the thoracic cavity increasing in volume. In other words, there is a decrease in pressure on the inside of the thoracic cavity, and this allows air to be sucked into the lungs. Okay, to the right and the left lung over there. With exhalation, this being a passive process, so the body simply relaxes. And you'll see here, I've drawn the lungs again, I've indicated the ribs, and you'll see that what happens now is the rib cage is allowed to return to its normal position. It returns back downwards. The diaphragm relaxes up into its dome shape again. This increases the pressure inside of the thoracic cavity. In other words, the volume is decreased and the air is then forced out of this cavity. Okay? The inhalation or breathing in, inhalation as a process is an active process, which means it requires energy. So there's active contraction of muscle, and normal breathing in exhalation is the muscles simply relax and allow the rib cage and the diaphragm to return to their normal positions. All right, Junior Tukkies, I hope that this first video has given you a little bit of insight and has helped you better understand the processes and the structures that are involved in the respiratory system. Please make sure that you do get a hold of the other videos as well as the theory booklet and questions, which we will be dealing with in other videos, just so that you can practice these and prepare for your final exams. Once again, this is Mr. P. I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I do hope to see you again.